Hello everyone and welcome to the FHGen140 Grammar Guide. This time we'll be talking about writing incomplete sentences. So the first thing we need to talk about is what is a complete sentence? And I'm sure you're well acquainted with this definition, but a sentence is a group of words that expresses a complete thought. So a complete sentence will have a subject and a predicate that includes a verb. A complete sentence will not be a dependent clause, and we'll talk about dependent clauses later on. A complete sentence does not usually start with a subordinating conjunction. Again, we'll talk about subordinating conjunctions later on. So I want to give you some examples of some incomplete sentences so you can understand maybe what we're looking not to do first. So incomplete sentences can be short or long. Just because it's long doesn't mean it's a complete sentence. For example, I am sad is a short, complete sentence. I is the subject, am is the verb. Sad is actually a predicate adjective that describes the subject of the sentence. Okay, the second sentence is longer and it's incomplete. Okay, so this longer incomplete sentence is the incredibly competent genealogist from the United Kingdom. See, all we have in that sentence is a subject. It doesn't tell us what. We want to know, what did this incredibly competent genealogist do? Or who is this person? But we only get the subject of the sentence. A complete sentence will have a subject and a predicate. So the subject of a sentence is who or what a sentence is about, and a predicate tells us about what the subject does or is. So down here you'll see the incredibly competent genealogist located her uncle in the 1920 census. Right here in black is the subject, and in red is the predicate. So our genealogist is the simple subject of our sentence. The incredibly incompetent all describe the genealogist. And located is the verb in this sentence. The next one, the forgetful writing teacher did not remember to grade papers. So the subject, the simple subject would be teacher, and the, forgetful, and writing tell you what teacher. The predicate here is did not remember to grade papers. The verb, it's actually a compound verb. We have two verbs, did and remember. The word not modifies did remember. And then to grade papers is actually describes remember. It's a prepositional phrase that describes remember. Okay, so a complete sentence will not be a dependent clause. So let's talk about what a dependent clause is. It's a group of words that has a subject and a verb but does not express a complete thought. And I think this is where a lot of you are kind of getting tripped up. Just because there is a sentence or a subject and a verb does not mean that it expresses a complete thought or that it's a complete sentence. So this is a complete sentence. The water in the river had receded, which slowed our progress. So the dependent clause in here is in blue, which slowed our progress. That depends on the rest of the sentence. The water in the river had receded for it to be a complete thought. The next one, do you know the lawyer who appeared in court last week? So the complete sentence is the entire thing. Do you know the lawyer who appeared in court last week? In blue, we have our dependent clause, who appeared in court last week. And we need the rest of the sentence for it to express a complete thought, for it to make sense. The next sentence, I am not doing extra credit work in this class unless I get credit for it. So in blue, unless I get credit for it is not a complete thought. It's a dependent clause. It does have a subject, I. It does have a verb, get, but it's not a complete thought because it has this word right here, unless. We'll talk about that word in just a couple of minutes. So the next one, the excellence of a gift lies in how appropriate it is rather than how valuable it is. So in blue, again, we have the dependent clause rather than how valuable it is. But it can't stand on its own. It needs the rest of the sentence for it to make sense, for it to be complete. Okay, so let's look at some examples of incorrectly used dependent clauses. He died in Ohio in 1801, period, which is unfortunate because death records do not exist for the early 19th century. So right here, which is unfortunate because death records do not exist for the early 19th century. That is an incorrectly used dependent clause. It needs the rest of the sentence, he died in Ohio in 1801, for it to make sense, for it to have meaning. And that is due in large part to this word right here, which. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. Do you know the man, question mark, who is responsible for the burning of courthouses in the South during the Civil War? Again, who is responsible for the burning of courthouses in the South during the Civil War is not a complete sentence. It needs this sentence, do you know the man, for it to make sense. And altogether, if we take out this question mark, then it's a complete sentence. Okay, the next one. There is no way to find someone in the 1890 census, period, unless you are really lucky, period. Again, unless you are really lucky is not a complete, not a complete sentence. It's a dependent clause. You need the other sentence, there is no way to find someone in the 1890 census, for it to make sense. Okay, your writing teacher wants you to use complete sentences, period, rather than fragments, period. So again, rather than fragments is not a complete sentence. It's a dependent clause. It needs the entire sentence before it for it to make sense. And it's, again, it's these words, rather, unless, who, which. So let's talk about those. Those words are called subordinating conjunctions. And what a subordinating conjunction is a subordinating conjunction connects a subordinating clause to a main clause. Now, if you're kind of shaking your head right now, let's explain that in slightly simpler terms. So subordinating conjunction connects a part of a sentence that depends on the main clause or main sentence for meaning. So you need the rest of the sentence for it to make sense. Subordinating clauses begin with subordinating conjunctions, words like if, even if, or although. For example, here's a line from a song by Chicago. If you leave me now, you'll take away the biggest part of me. So the subordinating clause, if you leave me now, cannot stand on its own. We need the entire sentence. If you leave me now, you'll take away the biggest part of me, for it to make sense. There also should be a period right there. If a subordinating clause is used on its own, the result is only a fragment of a sentence. So here's some examples. Although he is writing his great dissertation, while I see your point that the earth does revolve around the sun, until you start paying attention, none of these are complete sentences. They all need more information to make them complete, for them to make sense. We just have the beginning of our sentence. So some common subordinating conjunctions, I got these online at the Write at Home blog. So you can kind of look through these, after, although, as if, even, if only, now, which, who, unless, that, than, once. You can use these to begin sentences, but you need to make sure that the subordinating clause is supported by a main sentence. So how do we avoid sentence fragments? You need to recognize the elements of a complete sentence. So we need to have a subject, we need to have a predicate with a verb in it. We need to look out for pitfalls for subordinating conjunctions, beginning a sentence with subordinating conjunctions. If your sentence begins with a subordinating conjunction, you just need to make sure that that you have a main sentence that helps it to make sense. So if you start a sentence with a word like when, you know you're going to need more than just that clause. So if I say when I go to the store, that's not a complete sentence. I need to say when I go to the store, I usually buy bread, or something like that. That would make it a complete sentence. Proofread, proofread, proofread. Read your papers out loud. Make sure that everything's making sense. If you're ending a sentence and your voice is going up, that usually means that there should be more to it. Okay, seek peer review. Ask somebody to proofread and to help you to have sentences and papers that that makes sense. Complete sentences, no sentence fragments. And this is, I hate to be a stickler, but if you're going to be writing professionally at all, this is one thing that will really be a turnoff to clients or to journals. So you need to make sure that you're doing this, that you're writing complete sentences. So I hope that's been helpful, and I wish you the best of luck in your writing.